patients are coming back and places are busy, but offices are getting a little stretched thin because there's been a lot of staff, whether it be front desk, assistants, hygienists, whatever it might be, who either have not come back or have decided, hey, you know what, after COVID, I want to do something different. And I think that's been kind of where the challenge has been more from an actual in-office staffing standpoint. As we all know, a hygienist obviously is very, well-trained and can see a lot of things. And a lot of times we'll catch things that maybe the doctor won't because they're, bouncing in the room real quick to check things and move on to the next patient. And so the hygienist can be really at the front of the line of looking for things like oral diagnosis, oral cancer. When you're in school, you learn hygiene or you learn dentistry or assisting, but you don't actually learn anything about the management and the business side. And that's everybody's number one complaint in practice. It's never the dentistry. It's always the management.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Tale of Two Hygienists, episode number 333. I am your host, Andrew Johnston, and thank you for finding this show and giving it a listen. I'm really impressed with all of you, by the way. Speaking of everyone tuning in and listening, the show, it has grown so much this year. And we saw these gains, of course, during the pandemic, right in the very beginning of it. And then we kind of plateaued, I would say. And then all of a sudden this year, everyone, you guys have really come and sharing with your friends and doing all that. We've been averaging almost 2,000 downloads every day for the last several months. And what that means is that there's 50,000 downloads a month or more. We've hit 60,000 too. And so, I'm really impressed. We've never had a stretch of 3 months that have been this good. So keep it up, but also from the bottom of my heart, sincerely, thank you so much for all of the support. It means just the absolute world to me. So I will do my part. I will try and keep bringing you great guests like the one we have on today, Dr. Sam Shamardi. He is a periodontist. He's joining us again. He's phenomenal. I mentioned it last episode, I think, where I was saying something about, like in the intro, I said something about, me being a little bit scatterbrained as we were going through the interview. And I was trying to figure out what is it about certain guests that I have on that makes my brain just not go in order the way it should. And I was thinking about it, and he and so many other ones, it's because I think that they're just so fascinating to me. They're so interesting, and it pulls my interest to another level of what they can provide, and they don't ever let me down. They just never stop delivering. And so, again, this is one of those ones. It does kind of go all over the place, but he handled it so well, like the absolute professional that he is. And so I'm very thankful for him. Next week, we have a roundtable discussion you're not going to want to miss. It's with some of the most amazing people I've admired from afar for quite some time. They have a level of dedication to the profession that is really hard to come by these days. And I'm talking about Ryan Rutar and Jen Kopp. They joined myself and Stephanie Botts, and they discussed Pride Month, and that's coming up in June. And so it's a really good episode. You're not going to want to miss that. Before we get to today's episode, I do want to say, just got a generalized disclaimer, because on Friday, there's going to be a new type of episode that comes out. Now, normally we have episodes that come out on Fridays. It's been really well received by all of you. We're really thankful for that. But I wanted to improve upon one thing the last several years, and it was I was trying to figure out how can we make the podcast for the people, so to speak, for all of you, because you make up such a wide variety of human beings listening to this show. It's not just one type. And I wanted to try and make sure that everyone gets something that they're really passionate about, or they're engaged with, or they're a part of, and maybe not always catering to the smarty pants CE takers, which has been kind of our listenership for so long. And so last year I was speaking with my friend Anna. She works at a DSO like I do in kind of a similar leadership position. And after we were done talking shop, we started talking about the Facebook group RDH Rant, which she's a big contributor towards. And if you don't know about RDH Rant, it's a place for hygienists, and you have to only be a hygienist. And you can come vent after a long, frustrating day or during a lunch break if you just need to see how everyone else is doing and check in with them and maybe get a laugh here and there. It's just kind of a safe space for everyone to go to. I will say that though, right here, and this is kind of where the disclaimer comes in, it's not always the most quote unquote professional. And so as Anna and I were talking about, all of these things about the group, and we talked about doing a podcast together at some point, but it just never happened. And then a few months ago, we talked about it again. It came up and we started talking about the logistics and how it would work. And, we came to an agreement of sorts. And so here's the catch. I'm going to say it again. They are a bit more rambunctious than myself. If you've been with the podcast for a while, if you remember, I used to always beep out Michelle every time that she said some no words. It might be similar to that. The topics are not going to be CE worthy. They're very much not going to be suitable for work or having the kids maybe in the back of the car. It's going to be a podcast that you're going to probably want to screen for yourself first while you're by yourself and then see how it goes. They're going to be talking about the topics that come up in that group. And so for so many of you, you're going to identify, you're going to relate. It's going to be real life for so many, but for other people, you're not going to be able to relate at all. And to me, it's worth taking a chance to see if this is something that people want to hear. So having said that, I want to be very, very clear. On Friday's episode, if you are a sensitive soul, you might not want to listen to that. But I would love your feedback if you do take a chance on it and you want to listen to it. Send me an email, Andrew@A-Tale-of-Two-Hygienists. Let me know if you think that we should be doing these type of collaborations with other people, with the people from RDH Rant, or if they should maybe be on their own feed. I really want to hear from you, so please don't be shy about reaching out. I think that's all for me. Thank you very much to Tameka Lee for guest co-hosting with me once again. I can't wait to have you back on the show again in the future. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done with us. And here's our episode with Dr. Sam Shamardi.
A tale of two hygienists.
Welcome, everyone, to the interview portion of the podcast. We are joined today by Dr. Shamardi, and Tameka is also joining me again for another episode. Tameka, thank you again for doing this. In this episode, we're going to talk, I think we're talking financials is the name of the game, but we're welcoming back Dr. Sam Shamardi. He was on episode also 273. So make sure you guys go back and listen to this. Dr. Shamardi, this is going to be episode 333. You got a thing with the threes, so I appreciate that.
Three's a new lucky number.
I think so. So let's start off with this question. Tameka and I were talking a little bit about how we want to kind of game plan this episode, and we wanted to start off with a post-COVID question. What's the financial health of offices that you're seeing post-COVID versus kind of before COVID, and what's the trajectory there? Yeah,
that's a good question. I think one thing that's been very surprisingly pleasant for a lot of my colleagues, I think a lot of people actually in 2021 actually had record years. So I don't know if you've seen that trend, but I certainly have across friends that are general dentists along with different variety of specialists. So I think just, people wanting the normalcy, obviously having put off their care and kind of jumping back in. I think from that standpoint, we saw a lot of practices that had record numbers, had record years, which is a great thing. I think though, conversely with that's being balanced out with what actual owners and officers are seeing from a staffing standpoint. So it's like the patients are coming back and places are busy, but offices are getting a little stretched thin because there's been a lot of staff, whether it be, front desk, assistants, hygienists, whatever it might be, who either have not come back or, have decided, hey, you know what, after COVID, I want to do something different. And I think that's been kind of where the challenge has been more from an actual in-office staffing standpoint.
Do you attribute the growth or is kind of the consensus of, yes, people are just now coming back in record numbers because they weren't allowed to come into the dental offices? Or is it more of, I don't want to say that the clinician is kind of a little bit more geared up towards doing bigger treatment plans because we don't know when we're going to see him again? Or is it also just a shortage of dental professionals that lead people into your office that weren't there before? Like where are all of these numbers coming from?
Yeah, it's a great question. And my feeling always was that we'll really have a better realistic sense of where things are at the end of this year. It's kind of like, you do a good workout and the next day you're like, I feel fine. And then the second day suddenly is when it hits you. So that's how I kind of look at this from our standpoint. I think, last year, again, we had these record numbers, but coming off of the year before where there was a shutdown and obviously an entire overhaul and people want normalcy, people are trying to play catch up. And so you're seeing a spike there. And I think the real proof of kind of where things lay and where they are, I think we're going to see it once we get through this year and kind of see how the dust settles. Because now there's that balance between, like we talked about right now, the patient standpoint and, what they're really doing and did they do all the work they needed and now are they kind of backing off? And then from the staffing standpoint that we were just mentioning, well, how's that going to start balancing out? So I think this year is really going to tell us realistically what's going on. I don't think that just last year, I don't want to call it an anomaly, but I definitely think it's has a little bit of an asterisk in it, and not just for our field, obviously for everybody.
Dr. Shamardi, how would you say that supply costs, would you say they balanced out? I know we saw a surge in 2020, but in 2021, how did the supply costs, did you see it balancing out? I've been kind of out of the clinical world for about a year now, so.
Yeah. Good question. I mean, I think that also put a big strain. I think the whole supply chain issue still exists. I think it's gotten, better in the last few months compared, but, it's strange. There's some offices that still, getting disposable gowns, which is, me as a periodontist, hopping around. You don't want me wearing a white coat with stuff that can be going all over the place. So, disposable gowns is more my thing. And, there's the shortages of it. And even if they have it, the prices have gone up. So offices have been trying to offset that either with trying to buy more things up front in bulk. It might not come for weeks later, but they're buying a lot more of it to try and plan for the long term. And then also being in different practices and seeing things, some practices have also just started to increase some fees on some stuff. Just between the inflation that we're seeing and then again, this whole supply chain issue, it really hit practices pretty hard. And one of their ways of trying to kind of offset that and balance it has been raising the fees on some stuff.
Are private practices still doing, I don't know if it's still popular to do like the group or bulk buying like clubs or I guess I don't really understand that so much, but I think Smile Source might be one of them, but is that still popular?
I don't think quite as much. Again, I think that was really, especially last year, more of kind of like, how we can deal with things up front. And I think, again, now things starting to normalize more so. Still, I don't think it's nearly completely where it was prior, but it's definitely normalized a lot more.
We see a lot of dental assistants and hygienists, especially in my area, but I'm sure this is, nationwide and probably even worldwide, that are kind of going towards the temp agency route. What we're hearing back from hygienists is that they didn't really want to work 5 days a week, and this is a way that they can still make the money with the costs being the prices being higher for their their hourly wage. They're able to do that in 4 days what they were doing in 5 days. So I imagine even though we've had record numbers, maybe gross, like what is the net profits really looking like for this past year? Are we also seeing record profits or just record income?
Yeah, that's a great point, and that really plays to the balancing act that we're talking about. I think some places they're seeing records in terms of maybe the work that the dentist has been doing, as opposed to maybe the numbers coming in specifically from hygiene, for example, because of this difference in shortage and changing of hours. So again, more the reason we're emphasizing really seeing how things go in 2022 and how things balance out. And I think you nailed it on the head. I think hygienists are tip of the spear on this, and even along with hygienists, dental assistants, not in the same way, but in a different form, have fallen into this where they're looking at how things are post-COVID and the time off and being remote and kind of looking at things and being like, do I really need to be coming in and doing this the same amount as I was? And, being remote isn't so bad. And you've had people making career changes. And so that's created a strain. And I think, we're going to talk a little about financials and even talk about some solutions to stuff. I think that's where I've been starting to, look into and I've actually been kind of working with a couple new dental companies that are trying to, bring solutions to this in terms of, helping practices find people, because now that's the big challenge. In the past, a simple Craigslist, Indeed, or a simple ad in the paper, in our field, I know we're usually, dinosaur age. We're decades behind everybody else always, but that always did the job. And so, nobody really thought much of it. But now it's like, wait a second, we're really not finding, much, or we're not finding what we're looking for on there. So what are we going to do about that? And there's been some new companies that I'm happy to mention and talk about that have kind of sprouted up to try and bring solutions to that and create a place where, there's a little bit more of a credible kind of base of whether it's hygienists, assistants, staff, whatever it might be, with reviews, with their paperwork and license and CE stuff, and all in one place. So you don't have to do as much digging around and even for the hygienist or the assistant, it's good for them as well, because they have a place they can check in.
Yeah.
So I think you're seeing this evolution that's definitely going on. That's all going right now.
I mean, do you mind just jumping in and talking about some of these companies that are really helping the practices thrive?
Yeah. I think there's a few. There's one I had looked into, and this is more from the actual doctor standpoint and really specifically from the specialist standpoint. There's a great company called Pair Dental, like a pair of shoes. And what they were really doing are still doing, is they're helping connect specialists with practices, and vice versa. They're helping practices find specialists. So if you're a dental owner and you're thinking, I want to have perio in my office, but I don't know the process. I don't know who would be a good fit. All the equipment and the onboarding. This company's really connecting the dots and bringing everybody together. And they're taking a lot of the busy work out. They're kind of acting in some ways as a middleman between negotiating stuff for the practice and the clinician, and the specialist is coming in, making sure from the equipment standpoint, the credentialing for insurance. I mean, the whole 9 yards. So you can come as a specialist and say, hey, I live in this state. I want to travel and go and maybe practice in these states, or I want to stay local and be within 50 miles of where I am. And I'm looking for a good practice. So this is a great solution, even for new grads, especially. You're trying to find places to go work, and what a great resource to be able to connect with them as a specialist and be able to find somebody. So that's one.
Before you move on off of that one, though, Doctor, do you mind talking about a little bit about the economics behind that? Because the whole thought of, should I have a specialist come in to work Friday so they can sink implants in and do whatever, or perio or whatever, what's the cost benefit for that for patients?
Yeah, I think this has been a big change, in my opinion, from the whole financial, I don't know what to call it, collapse, or what you want to call it, back in 2007, 2008. That's really been the big transition, where I think practices started to realize, holy cow, we got to find new ways to generate revenue in the practice than the traditional model of, let me refer to my Rolodex of orthodontists and endodontists and perio and this and that. People started looking and saying, we got to find ways to survive ourselves. And I think that's where you saw people saying, well, why don't we start bringing people in? And in addition to that, of course, that's where I think you saw a huge spike in general practitioners also saying, well, let me go and take courses and start doing some of this work myself. Which obviously, as a specialist, there's a whole different kind of mindset and approach to that. And, dentistry is a very odd field in terms of how things are organized. And, myself as a specialist, I went through dental school. I got all the training. But as a specialist, I'm not allowed to do any general dentistry. But the general dentist has, a clean slate and is allowed to do whatever they want. So it's a little bit of a different model. But I think, to answer your question, these practices see this as a solution. And it's been great for them because, they're able to now, by bringing somebody in, obviously there's a percentage, that they're dividing between the two, but that's allowing them to keep that extra revenue within the practice. It's good advertising and marketing for their patients, because they're saying, hey, we don't have to send you to some random place, even though we trust and we've got a great referral. We don't have to have you now get in a car and drive to an office that you're maybe not familiar with and deal with an entire other office. You know us, you trust us, you've been with us for 15 years. Well, we can now, keep you right here with us and do all of your work in a place that you're familiar with.
Sure. Do they have that where, Yeah, I'm thinking about like my local periodontal practice, right? There's hygienists that work there too. Did the hygienists ever travel with the doctor to some of these offices and do like perio maintenance appointments?
Yeah, honestly, not so much, because if they were doing that, then that's taken away from the existing hygienist within that general practice. So, and again, I can speak to this directly, having worked specifically in this model for the last 12 years, and really coming out of residency and looking into how I wanted to practice. I was looking into, buying into and getting involved in a private perio practice. But having seen kind of what was going on and how the shift was occurring, to me, it just seemed like, wait a second, this is not really the way it used to be. Dentistry's changed, at least for perio. And it didn't seem like it made a lot of sense for my work, especially now when general dentists are, doing implants and they think crown lengthening is, a simple thing. And they're doing a lot more of the work directly themselves. So, that can vary. That may not be the same argument for endo or may not be the same argument for ortho. I mean, you can look at it specialty by specialty, but with this multi-specialty growth and now the whole rise of the DSO, I mean, that's essentially what they're building their model off of as a DSO. It's a one-stop, shop with all the different specialties, and they have a whole network of these. So this is definitely kind of how things have been kind of trending.
Tameka, wouldn't it be great, like, if we were all those really hard cases that you and I don't really want to touch, and maybe you're more perio-minded than I am, but like, I'm like, okay, every Friday your 7 and 8 millimeter pockets are going over there when the specialty team comes in.
And I think this model will increase patient compliance as well. Within the practice, they're staying within the practice. They feel comfortable. The periodontist comes in. Me as a hygienist, here you go. I have a patient for you.
Exactly. It sounds bad. We shouldn't be admitting that kind of stuff though, but like it's the truth. Like we're doing our best, but like we also, I feel like, Doctor, kind of what you're talking about, how the general dentist kind of is taking extra things on more and more that, should they, shouldn't they, it's kind of maybe depends on their skill level, and depends on their determination, depends on, their investment, not financial investment, but like their emotional, mental talent investment into getting good at it. And I think that's one of the things that, hygienists, maybe we know our limits as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think, if with this model, if it's done, we'll say in quotes here, quote unquote, if it's done, well, or done right, and you see everybody kind of knowing where things need to be, passed on, and you're seeing people spend the time to diagnose, and you're seeing the hygienist saying, hey, I've gone through phase 1 therapy and there's still continual issues, and now we need to kind of bump this up, and we've got a specialist that's coming in that we can have you see for that. I think if the model is run the way it could optimally be designed to do, it's a great system and it's a great model, and it can be extremely beneficial for the patient and overall care, and it's extremely profitable for the practice as well. Where it gets tricky is assuming whether or not that practice is really following it well. And it doesn't mean that they're not following it because, they're not doing stuff on purpose. It just comes down to some practices. And again, I can speak to this very well from first person experience, but some practices, you see practitioners who maybe just aren't as well, versed with some perio stuff. So they're not diagnosing, they're not finding perio, and it's not that it's not there, it's staring right at them. It's just their mindset is looking at bite wings and looking for decay and restorative work, and meanwhile there's tons of perio that's there, and then that translates down to the hygienist, because the hygienist is now thinking in terms of how the practice works and how what the owner is looking for, and now they're spending their time and energy trying to find stuff restoratively driven to help for the practice, and maybe not as much for the perio, and it creates this whole cycle. So I think when it's run, how we say, again, in quotes, properly, let's say, where everyone's kind of on board and everyone's kind of, invested, not just for perio, but for endo and ortho and everything, I think the model can work extremely well. It's just the variability that we have in our field is really extreme, because each individual office, the owner runs the show however he or she, wants to do it. So there's no real kind of overall set average standard. It's just kind of depends on that practice.
Dr. Shamardi, in your own words, you talked about the role of the dental hygienist being underestimated. Can you talk more about if the doctor and the hygienist, and then coming in with the specialists are aligned, how it can have better outcomes for the patient, but also better financially for the practice?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I really truly believe that the hygienist aspect is underestimated and really can be such a big difference maker for any practice, and it's really the whole 9 yards. I mean, a lot of the patients are most comfortable with their hygienist. They see them a couple times a year. They develop a rapport with them. They feel a little bit more safe simply because, they're not doing the big work on them, so to speak. They're not going to be the one coming in and telling them, hey, you need all these fillings and crowns and all this stuff. And so they just have a lot more of a direct relationship and are more open and comfortable talking with them. So from a patient standpoint, you already have that baseline relationship. And then how it works for the practice then is, if they have that, if they really do have perio issues that need to be addressed, or if they really do have restorative issues or wherever it might be, the doctor can come in and say their part. But to have that supplemented by the hygienist who they know and trust and are comfortable with, and for them to be able to say, hey, you know what, this really is serious, and I do think you should do it, and this is why, and all that, the added compliance that you're going to get for all around treatment is just really through the roof. And then from the practice standpoint, I know hygienists by kind of standard and law, you're technically not allowed to diagnose and be the doctor. But as we all know, a hygienist obviously is very, well trained and can see a lot of things. And a lot of times we'll catch things that maybe the doctor won't, because they're, bouncing in the room real quick to, check things and move on to the next patient. And so the hygienist can be really at the front of the line of looking for things like, oral diagnosis, oral cancer. They can do quick saliva testing. They can obviously check the radiographs and find things for perio or endo, wherever it might be. And it's not that the doctor doesn't know, but they might kind of miss something. So for them to be able to be that added set of eyes can really do so much for the practice as well. So much of that comes down to what the relationship is between the owner and the hygienist, how much they kind of are, empowering their hygienist to find stuff, to point them out, to speak to the patients about it before the doctor even walks in. And like I said, that's where that variability comes in, because, the practice that has an owner who's a very, centralized, everything goes through me, I run the show, I say all the things, will find it a lot more difficult, in my opinion, than an office that's a little bit more decentralized and giving a little bit more open rein to the other staff to say, hey, find these things, talk about it. And then when I come in, heck, it makes, my job that much easier and makes things run that much better. So I think things are underestimated with them. I think sometimes, they're put a little bit under too much strain, the hygienists, in terms of how much they're expected to do during the allotted time that they have. And one of the things I always argue in the lectures that I give is, if we give and provide enough time to allow the hygienist to really, update radiographs, which I think is something that's totally overlooked. It's always, oh, you haven't been here in a couple of years, here's 4 bite wings. Speaking as a periodontist, bite wings do you nothing. So you find nothing of, the periapical area, the bone levels. Not to mention, you don't see the anterior teeth. I don't understand how you're updating radiographs and you're missing half the mouth. So, give time to update radiograph, give time to actually, take a more thorough evaluation. And, owners are always thinking, well, that might mean I'm going to be seeing 2 patients less per day. So what about what I'm losing in terms of production for that? But my argument is, if you spend the time and update the radiographs and look a little bit closer at those patients, the sheer amount of just perio, forget about everything else, but now throw everything else on top of it, the amount of stuff that you're going to find that maybe you were overlooking is going to far outweigh, what an extra exam or 2 that's going to be rushed would have gotten for you. And I think you're going to see a huge increase in patient care and outcomes and office profitability. So again, I think it's really an underestimation of what they can do given the opportunity.
100%. Oh man, let's just clip that out and send it out to the world.
Send it.
Thank you, Dr. Shamardi. That was perfect.
Hey.
Can we run back? I feel like I cut you off like probably about 10 minutes ago. You're running through some of the platforms or systems that you're really excited about, kind of helping these ones. Let's get us back on track. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. Happy to go back on them. So I think I mentioned Pair as one from more the clinician standpoint as a specialist. Another one that they've been established now in a couple areas very, very well, especially like in the Texas and areas of Southern and Northern California, and they're expanding pretty quickly. Another company I'm starting to work with and familiar with, they're called Cloud. And Cloud Dental, like I mentioned, from a staffing standpoint, they're doing something, it's similar to kind of what Pear has been doing with the specialist, but now think of this as a hygienist or think of this as a dental assistant, where now they've got this home base where an office can say, hey, we don't have a hygienist this week. Our hygienist, for example, is very sick or is on their holiday for a week with their family. We need to find a temp to come in, or we're short an assistant who's left. We need to find a new assistant, either as a temp or just hire a new one permanently. You can go and use their platform, and rather than going on an Indeed or a Craigslist where everything is just all over the place, this is specific, obviously, for dental. This is specific for this database of, and even they even do it for clinicians. So whether it's clinicians, hygienists, assistants, whatever it might be, you can see this person's profile, you see their photo, you see their resume, you see their references, you see what type of qualifications they have. They're radiographically certified, they've done their CPR test, all of their certifications are on there. So all of this guesswork of, even if you go and you find somebody, you want to bring them into the office, and it takes you 2 weeks to find somebody, and then you find out, wait, this person doesn't even have CPR certification. Well, you're doing all of this. It's all being provided to you right up front. And what's great about that is now you can also see prior clinicians that have worked with them are leaving feedback. So, it's kind of like an Uber. You can't hide if you're not a good driver. The stars are going to show it and the comments are going to show it. Well, if you're not a good assistant or a hygienist, you're going to have those references and comments back from the offices that you worked at before. And conversely, if you are good, you're seeing the comments there and the feedback. So, it's a great resource. And I think as they continue to build and expand, which they are, you're going to start, I would, look to them as kind of a first stop rather than going on a more general, Craigslist, Indeed type of thing. I'd jump on this and look at them as a resource. So they're another really good one.
What about patient financing platforms? Is there anything that's really, are you excited about any one of them?
Absolutely, actually. I'll tell you about one that I'm very excited about. I've started to do some speaking on their behalf. One of them is called Sunbit. And these guys are awesome. So I think the big thing with them, I think everybody's familiar with Care Credit, and that's the one that's been around forever. And look, Care Credit is fantastic. They're a great platform. They've certainly helped offices survive and do things they weren't capable of doing. And I have nothing but good things to say about them. But I think what Sunbit has done is that they've taken what Care Credit has done and they've really raised the bar. And the big thing that they've been successful at doing within their patient financing is, Care Credit will, allow financing up to a certain point. So if a patient doesn't have a good credit score, they're obviously seen as a risk, understandably, and Care Credit will come in and say no. And if maybe the case is too big and maybe the fee is too high, they might say no. They have different reasons of obviously how they calculate things, but the bottom line is Care Credit is only covering so much of the patient database. But Sunbit is really taking that huge range of patients that has a mid-level or even a lower credit score that Care Credit wouldn't even touch. Sunbit has actually taken on the responsibility and the risk themselves, and they are accepting those patients and providing that financing. So as a dental practice, you've now opened the door to being able to now have patients that want to do treatment, and that's the frustrating thing. You'll have patients who actually want to do the work but don't have the money, and they aren't getting the financing from a financing group. But now Sunbit would come in with those same patients and say, absolutely, we will provide you that financing. So as a practice, now you are able to do treatment on patients that you wouldn't do. So obviously you're now going to be, profiting a significant amount. For the patient, it's a win because now you're obviously getting the treatment that you otherwise wouldn't get. And, if you look at the numbers, when it comes to even the patients with the good financing score, what Sunbit is doing is just as good, if not better, than Care Credit. The amount of financing they're providing is better. It's a bigger amount. And then, as I just said, for those lower credit score patients, the beauty is, they're taking on that risk. So in the very uncommon case, let's say the patient, gets the funding and starts to work and suddenly says, they vanish. In the past, as an owner or as a practice, we'd be freaked out because we'd be thinking, well, shoot, there's an extra $5,000 that now we're stuck with the bill. But they've come in and said, no, look, we're taking on that responsibility. That's our problem. So you don't worry about that. So for us as a practice, it's a no-lose situation. And the only thing we're gaining in the end is a heck of a lot more work than we otherwise would have had. So they're new on the scene. They were big in some other industries like vet, for example, and they're kind of newer into the dental field. People are starting to hear about them, and I think you're going to start seeing them growing, really fast. I think they're going to be a game changer.
I'm glad that the one that you actually had prepared. I wasn't sure where we're going with this one, but one of the things I like about Sunbit, I'm a big fan, right? Two big things, and you kind of alluded to this earlier. You have these big cases. Well, yes, they were in veterinary offices, but they also come from automotive. And you think about how expensive is a car, how much risk is this company going to take on something like a car? But then when you have these full-on rehabs that we need to do for some people's mouths, that they're not going to get financing any other way, who's going to put themselves out there for that big of a liability? And we've seen Sunbit kind of come through and step up to the plate and say, hey, we'll take on that challenge. And also the whole, I don't know if you've gone through like the process of like how a patient actually get like Care Credit and some other ones, you have to have like this really detailed application process and you go and put it to the portal.
Correct.
It takes forever. What we've experienced with Sunbit is you scan your driver's license and you're pretty much done, right? Like
10, 15 seconds. I did it. I tried it myself. And literally, I thought it was going to be a 5-10 minute thing and popped in a photo on an iPad, and 5 seconds later, they're like, all right, what do you want? Ready to go. I'm like, holy cow, that's
and there's
quick.
no hard pull on your credit later, so you don't have to worry about that. Right. Anyway, I'm glad that's who you came with, because I'm a huge fan of them. And we've seen a lot of great opportunity for our patients to get the treatment that they need because of them.
Yeah, no, really.
I think I want to talk a little bit about retirement and just big picture ideas of hygienist, assistant, front office. It doesn't matter who you are. Maybe we're not making the money that the doctors are making, but like, where do we need to be placing ourselves to secure our financial freedom in the future? What do we need to be doing?
Good questions. I mean, the one, it sounds like it's probably the easiest thing everybody hears, but I still think it's overlooked. The first part is you just got to start. And that means day one, year one, month one. And I think the big hesitation usually is the thought of, well, I just got out, I'm massively in debt, I haven't made a buck. I got to do this maybe 5 or 10 years from now when I actually have something to start putting towards. And I think what's missed is, even if the first month you're putting $5 away, $20 away, $50 away, whatever it might be, that over time grows significantly. And it's not an even step-by-step growth. It's actually quite a big jump. I don't want to say exponential, but it's a big jump that happens over time. So the biggest thing is starting from day one, simply because you'll see the growth over time. But then the other thing is it begins to develop the discipline and making you responsible of understanding, what your actual numbers are, what you can afford, what you can't afford. And then, being able to put away each month, it will start making you think about stuff of, I'm thinking of maybe, buying a couple extra things or doing this or that. And it's like, oh, but wait, then I'm not going to have this extra amount to put away towards savings. It starts to kind of change your mindset a bit. So I think the earlier you can start, the return later is just exponentially bigger what you're going to see. So I think that's probably the most overlooked thing, is just starting. And I think people will be very surprised to see. And the way I explain it is almost like, your loans. You don't realize in terms of a repayment standpoint that even if you repay an extra 50 or $100 per month off of your loan, you're thinking, well, that's not going to be that big of a difference in the long run. But in reality, that can save you years in terms of how quick you're able to pay things back. And it's the same thing in the opposite way with the savings, where just chipping away early on, you can really start building up.
I feel like I've seen a lot on social media, dental professionals getting involved in like cryptocurrency and things like that. Are you seeing that too?
Quite a bit, I think, especially last year. Again, 2021 kind of being a little bit of like I said, the year of the asterisks as far as I'm kind of looking at it. Yes, that's taken off a lot. I actually heard of a few people who, younger, just kind of came out, got into it, hit it when it got big, and we're making a lot and paying off a lot of loans, which I'm like, boy, that wasn't around for us. But it is something that's taken off a lot. But I think, again, as we've seen, it's certainly cooled off quite a bit. And you saw, some of those cryptos that were going off the rails have now also cooled off quite a bit. So, like I said, I think you're seeing things maybe balance a bit more. I do think it's something you're going to see a lot more of, especially with the younger generation. It's something kind of new and different and, kind of cool. It's exciting, a little bit of a status thing. Exactly. And I think it's good, but I think you also have to, I think it's a little bit of a cautionary tale as well. I think the easiest thing people can see, you saw a couple of professional athletes who asked for huge chunks of their contracts to be in crypto, and they saw, 70, 80% of that vanish. So, there goes their huge contract. It's suddenly, not so huge anymore. So it doesn't mean that it can't be another kind of vehicle and another way to kind of, spread the buckets in terms of, areas that you're working on. I don't think there's anything bad in that, but I do think trying to skip over some of the other options and the more, traditional ones that have at least been proven to go all in on something like that, I don't think that's a good idea. But if there's, a certain percentage or a certain amount of what you want to, save that you want to get into that, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as you know what you're getting into. Do
you feel like the doctors that are looking at retirement, let's say that they're in their mid 40s now, I feel like the general doctors just, I'm going to work until I can't work anymore because I just love dentistry so much. I don't feel like that's the same feeling anymore for these 40-something-year-old doctors. So what are they looking at, and why has that changed possibly?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that attitude is definitely of the prior generations. I think right now the attitude is, how soon can I get out?
Yeah.
I think it's swung the total opposite way. And now I think that's helped perpetuate this whole DSO, flame, because they're looking for places to buy up, and people, this group that you're mentioning are looking to sell. So I think the new thing that you're seeing as a trend are people that want to have one or two or three practices, work at them for, X amount of years, pay their bills, build them up until they become really attractive for these DSOs, and be able to come to them and say, hey, you're looking for somewhere new, I'm looking to sell, and get a big, payout, buyout. And in their mind, at least, and they're thinking, they do that and they can maybe call it a career. So I think the mindset's changed, where it's not, I love this, I want to do this forever. It's kind of, well, what steps do I have to take to get the heck out of this, as soon as I can, or to significantly limit how much I have to be in it. And I think part of what's made that be the case, number one, is just how significant the loans are. Not that, everything proportionally over time, tuition was less, but, so was the cost of everything. But I think that has kind of shifted, where things have gotten a little bit too out of hand. I mean, the tuition prices for dental schools and stuff are just, it's ridiculous, and then I think that puts a big amount of pressure. And then you buy a practice, and now you look at the market where things aren't as cleanly divided up between, here's your general practitioner, here's your specialist. People are coming to one place. You're seeing all this multi-specialty, and now the DSOs coming in. You're seeing insurances cut significantly what they're going to give. So, a crown that might have gotten you, $1,000 before is only getting you $700 before. So you're losing 30% just like that. So they're feeling the strain. So pro is that it's bringing about some creativity in terms of ideas and what people are developing. But that's what you're seeing. People are looking at the noose is getting tightened more and more. And that's causing people to, say, hey, what do I got to do to get out?
Well, I mean, it's almost a sad note to end on, but
yeah.
I feel like we have lots more conversations, Doctor, about financials. I have another probably 10 questions here for the next time. So first of all, thank you so much for your time. But any last thoughts or anything that you want to say to our audience before we take off, and also where can they contact you?
Yeah, biggest thing in terms of finance stuff, I would just say to people is create a plan. When you finish between loans, between expenses, between retirement, insurances, all that stuff we talked about, kind of make a plan from day one. And, not to toot a horn or anything, but, I wrote a book specifically about this called The Financial Survival Guide for Dentists, which you can get on Amazon or anywhere you want, which basically was geared towards talking about this. It's telling new grads, whether they're dentists, hygienists, whatever they are, to say, here's the stuff you need to know that we're never taught. Because when you're in school, you learn hygiene or you learn, dentistry or assisting, but you don't actually learn anything about the management and the business side. And that's everybody's number one complaint in practice. It's never the dentistry. It's always the management. So, at least that's one solution that people can look at and use as a guide, as kind of like a textbook to kind of help them get settled. So that's probably the biggest thing is if you can set yourself on a good path from the beginning, it will really take a lot of the heat off that we're talking about. And then as far as contact, anybody can reach out anytime. I'm not huge on social media, but I do now finally have a little bit of a Instagram thing. It's just at Dr. Sam Shamardi. That's I guess it's called the handle. I got to make sure I use the proper terminology. I have a website, just drsamshamardi.com. I do a lot of lecturing through Catapult Education. So you always find me different parts of the country. I think I'll be this month in Kansas City and doing a lot of webinar lectures and, East Coast, West Coast, I'm kind of all over. So easy to find whether on the website or through social. And again, happy to help, answer any questions people have. And obviously would love to pop back on and have another combo with you and talk about whatever you guys need.
Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you for all that you do for the profession. I think you're a wealth of knowledge and we'll definitely have you back on again. But all right,
great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Good to see you.
Yeah, this is a tale, oh yeah, a tale of two hygienists. So there might be only one, bringing the best of dental knowledge, and we do it all with ease. We cover oral health and screening, and preventing gum disease. We're gonna do a lot of learning, and have a little bit of fun working at the dentist. A tale of two hygienists.